Good morning, church. Happy Sabbath. Happy Sabbath. We'll talk about that. We've been doing a sermon series, and by we, I mean Pastor Coasley, because I started it and then he, did a double header back to back. And I really appreciated his preaching while I was gone. How about you guys? I was blessed. I watched every sermon because here's the thing. Mission doesn't move forward by itself. Mission doesn't move forward by itself. Mission doesn't move forward just by God. Mission doesn't move forward by itself. And mission doesn't move forward just by God. Mission doesn't move forward by itself, and mission doesn't move forward just by God. God could move mission forward by himself. He is capable to. It's not his desire. His desire is to move mission forward with us. In fact, Jesus said this interesting thing. Jesus said, if we don't do mission, the rocks will cry out and move the mission forward. Now, I don't know how many rocks are out there, and so I want us to move the mission forward, and we're ending this series talking about many messages in one channel, and the idea here is that we need to reach many, so we must speak in many different ways. Mission needs to move forward, and we need to speak in languages that people understand. We must learn to say things. Are you ready for me today? That are understandable. We must learn to say things that mean something. We must learn to say things that are understandable and mean something, but not just to us, to the multitudes. So if I ask you this question, I've been asking everybody this question. If you ran into me today, you've heard this question. What's your favorite Robin Williams movie? Now, I asked that once because I once preached a whole sermon and used Forrest Gump as the background, and at the end, I realized no one in that whole congregation had ever seen Forrest Gump. I know, right? So I'm being very careful because Robin Williams did many movies, so you have to have seen something. I'm picking him on purpose because he's very relatable. And if you haven't, now you have some post-Sabbath activities that you may enjoy. If I was to ask you, what is your favorite Robin Williams movie? Do you know what you would pick? All right. I like that. Anybody else? Mine would be Dead Poets Society, followed by Good Will Hunting, and then we all could use a reminder that war isn't always good. Good Morning, Vietnam. Robin Williams had a way that his movies could speak to you no matter who you were, no matter what walk of life you came from, no matter what your philosophical point of view. He was kind of the guy that did movies for everybody. But for me, I think his movies were second, were his B line. For me, anyone remember this? Mork and Mindy. I'm a good Gen Xer. This is where Robin Williams got his start. By the way, not quite. I can geek out for you. He actually got his start on Happy Days. Anybody remember the Fonzie? He was an alien and showed up and battled the Fonz. And it was such a big hit, they gave him his own show called Mork and Mindy. And for me, I always wanted to see Happy Days. I always wanted to see Mork and Mindy. I wanted to see Laverne and Shirley, all those sitcoms. I don't know. I'm an old guy. Today it would be like Big Bang Theory, Friends, But Mork and Mindy. Now, this will just test if I'm the only one who's seen Mork and Mindy. What does Mork, Robin Williams, say what's his greeting? What's his calling card? Oh, someone said it. Nanu, nanu. Now, I did some research into Orkin so I could find out what nanu, nanu means. And it was interesting, Pastor, because the answer I got for what nanu, nanu means, you might need to translate. Salute. Salute. It's just a greeting. Just a greeting. So I grew up in Canada, as you know. And I'm referring to Pastor Cosley as knowing his French, because I should know my French. I should have known my French growing up, but I was not a good language student, nor a good French student. But this led to an existential crisis in my house, because we did not have cable. So to not have cable in the 70s and 80s in Canada meant this. You had 2 TV channels to watch. And one was in English, and the other was in French. I wanted to watch Mork and Mindy. But news was on the English station. I was like, I don't know when Mork and Mindy will make it to the English station. But back then it was like really a cool show. I was like, I gotta watch Mork and Mindy. So I go to Channel 4. It's the French channel in my neighborhood. I'm there. I'm sitting there by the TV. I'm watching Mork and Mindy, and I can reckon. I'm learning French. It's a miracle, Pastor. I understood nanu nanu. But then something really crazy happened. I'm watching it, and this is I made this slide. Mork is on the screen with David Letterman. Now, you guys know who David Letterman was, right? Good, because I don't want to have to go back and tell you about Johnny Carson. Oh, you see, we think differently and know different things in what? Different generations. And I was very confused. I was about 10 years old, and I'm like, David Letterman is a talk show host. Mork is from the planet Ork. And he's a fictional character, but David Letterman isn't a fictional character. He's a comedian who does a talk show. Now, I can't understand what they're saying. But I come into this channel and I just see Mork going, nanu, nanu. And David Letterman going, irk, irk, irk. I don't know what irk means in French or English. I don't know that it has a meaning in either, Pastor. But on one channel, one side, Mork, there's a big group of people. And they seem to be getting agitated and angry at each other. And Mork is going, nanu, nanu. And he's going, irk, irk, irk. And Mork is going, nanu, nanu. And he's going, irk, irk, irk. And I wanted to know, what in the world is Mork and David Letterman talking about? And I tried so hard sitting there, like maybe if I touched the TV, the French will somehow come into me. Maybe if I listen harder, I could turn up the volume. That will help me understand, right? I could sit closer to the TV. Will that help me understand? Nothing I did, no matter how hard I tried, helped me understand why David Letterman was looking at Robin Williams and going, ark, ark, ark. And you want to know something? It wasn't until this week when I thought about this story for this sermon illustration that I looked it up on YouTube and watched the episode. That's good sermon research. And David Letterman was playing a con man in a multi-market level. And Morkid went there because he realized he's in love with Mindy and he needed to get moral support. And irk was a scam. Like he was charging them $100 a night to come to the support group. And if they went irk, they could irk their troubles away. And I thought to myself, that's a pretty cool story. I wish I could have understood it as a child. And then I thought to myself, that's what church is like. For people who don't speak our language. That's what church is like. For people who don't know our songs. That's what church is like. For people who don't know when you're supposed to sit, stand, or kneel. If they listen careful, they still don't understand. If the preacher gets louder, they still don't understand. If they sit closer, it'll help. But they still don't understand. And it's not their fault they don't understand. It's that we speak one language and they speak another. That's what happens to people trying to understand the gospel when we're speaking the gospel in church code. And we do speak the gospel in church code. And Paul got this. And Paul didn't change the gospel. But he put it on the channel the people could understand. Because you don't need to change the message. But you got to present the message in a way that it can be understood. You got to present the message in a way that people who are coming in who do not speak the same language, the Christianese, you know what Christianese is, right? You don't? You don't know church language? Churchanese is what we talk about when we do like Happy Sabbath and are you staying for potluck? And I hope you got saved today and are you feeling sanctified? And we're like, why didn't they like our song? Why didn't they understand? Potluck was vegetarian. Christianese is this insiders trading language we talk. That outsiders can't understand. In fact, in Acts of the Apostles, in a commentary on Paul's life, this is what it says. It says, Paul did not approach the heathen. Heathen is just an old-fashioned word for unbeliever. Paul did not approach the unbeliever trying to tell them how much they were wrong, but seeking first to what? To find a point of contact. I only had 2 points of contact. Nanu. Hear me. I had 2 points of contact. Nanu. And it kept me at that TV trying to figure that out. Because I love Mork. And there are people who love Jesus. And what Paul did for people who love Jesus, who didn't speak Christianese, is he tried first to find a point of contact. After all, we're all just people, right? After all, we all have the same kinds of problems. You know that the divorce rate outside of the church is lower than inside the church. Only by 1%, but still. People are people, and people have problems. And people come looking for places to connect. You know, there might be enough Lego over in the parsonage to build another church. My wife loves Lego. We have a lot of Lego over there. And one of the things about Lego is it only works because every piece has a point of contact. Like when I was a kid, they didn't give you the picture. They didn't give you a picture. They didn't give you a little booklet to follow and tell you, put the gray cube on the blue cube. They just gave you the blocks and said, figure out how to build the church. Now it comes with like instruction manuals and, different angle shots of what it's going to look like as you're putting it together. Like Lego is a serious business now. But it's still the same thing. If your Lego piece cannot connect to another Lego piece, it will never become part of the church. Are you with me today? Are you following me today? Oh, and every Lego block is you. And if you're not out there in the hallway connecting with new people, if you're not at potluck connecting with new people, if you're not doing your best to speak in the language that they understand, how will they help become part of the church? For me, it's deeply personal. I have a family member who's been trying to find her way into church. Not this church, the church in the Seventh-day Adventist church in her community. And just before I got up to preach, I said, I'm going to send you the link to the sermon I'm preaching today because I think you might like it. She'd been trying to find Jesus. And what she said to me right before I come up here, I'm feeling a little discouraged. I haven't went for a couple weeks. I'm feeling a little bit discouraged. And then she said, maybe I expected too much from them. No. God expects more from us. God expects us to be serious about connecting the Lego blocks. God expects us to use our connection points and our points of common causes, common beliefs, common thoughts, common interests That's why I really like the Cars and Cones small group, right? I love all the small groups, but I like that one because it's what we call an affinity group. It's a group that has a common interest. They like sports cars and driving things fast. But it helps make space for people to connect to the church. Paul says this in Corinthians. He says, though I am free and I belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. In other words, although I have the right to have my opinion, although I have the right to do church my way, although I have the right to be who I want to be, Paul says, I forfeit that right so that I may be a connector to Jesus. I may be a connector to the church for people struggling to find Jesus. Paul goes on to say, listen, to the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. But under the law, I became like one under the law. Though I myself were not under the law. As to what? Win those under the law. He's saying, I know who I am. I have my own identity. I have my own political affiliation, he says. Like I have my own philosophy. I have my own vocation. I have my own identity. But I don't care about all of that. If I'm not being a good connector to people who need to connect to the church. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. In other words, if they want to wear jeans to church, I will wear jeans to church. If they want to drive a motorcycle to church, I will drive a motorcycle to church. In my case, when I first went to church, I had a long ponytail all the way down my back, because my hair was to my waist. What I loved about that church is they loved me. They could have said, young man, that's not the way to dress when you come here. They could have said, is that your Sabbath best? But then I would have said, what's a Sabbath? Because I had no idea. To those not having the law, I became like one having the law. Though I am free from God's law, but under Christ's law, as to win those not having the law. So if you have the law, I will become like those who have the law. If you don't have the law, I'll become like those who have the law. In other words, if you are a conservative, I will become like a conservative. If you are a progressive, I will become like a progressive. But I didn't change a thing. I am still in Christ. But I care about being a connector to anyone who needs to be connected to Jesus. And then he goes on to say this is just mind-blowing stuff by the Apostle Paul. To the weak. To the what? To the who? To the weak, to the discouraged, to those that came week after week and couldn't find Jesus, To those who came and there was nobody in the hallway to greet them. To those who came and we didn't have Connection Cafe yet. To those who came and it wasn't potluck week. To those who came and didn't know the dress code. By the way, there is none. To the weak, I became weak to what? Win the weak. I have become all things to all people. Not because he's a flip-flopper. Not because he's a postmodernist. So that by all means, I might save some. He knows that even contextualizing your methodology, he knows that even learning to speak the native language of the missionary field, he knows that even doing all the good and right things that you would learn in a Seventh-day Adventist missionary class, he knows that still you will only save how much? Some. Imagine if you didn't do those things. I do all this for a reason. He says, I'm not flip-flopping, I'm not weak, I just become like the weak for the sake of the weak. I have a method to my madness. I am willing to adapt, I am willing to change, I am willing to morph, I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to do things differently because I don't do it to be different. I don't do it to be left. I don't do it to be right. I don't do it to be up. I don't do it to be down. I do this thing for the sake of the gospel. That I may share in its what? Blessings. All right. Got to have a sidebar here. When I sit down, there's a sidebar. You being blessed? According to Paul, if you're being blessed, you must be sharing the gospel. Need a little more blessing? Maybe share the gospel a little more. Maybe be willing to be flexible a little more. Not because you're changing your mind about anything. Because not everyone's a gold star medalist when they walk in here. Got another question for you. Who's the Apostle Paul and why are we so far into this sermon and we haven't even explained who he is? Because I promise you there is somebody watching online who doesn't have a clue who the Apostle Paul is. And you are all saying that is crazy, but that is true. And I'm going to tell you something right now. There are people in this room who don't know who the Apostle Paul is and they don't want to tell you they don't know. But we will preach about Paul and Peter and Moses and David and Daniel, especially Daniel, and John on the island of Patmos. What in the world is an island of Patmos? To reach people, we have to speak human. Not just Christianese. And this is how it's done. Paul was an apostle of Jesus. Simply means a buddy of Jesus, who Jesus sent out with a charge to help people find God. And Paul was very zealous and sometimes too zealous. But Paul was willing to go to jail for his faith. Paul was willing to die for his faith. Paul didn't have problems for church even when the air conditioning didn't work. He didn't have any, ever. Paul was just a faithful church member who gave everything he had to help Jesus find people who were trying to connect on Lego blocks that had no empty spaces. Sometimes we must slow down the gospel. And then the emails will come. You're preaching that watered down gospel. Talking too much about love and not duty. No. Let me tell you something right now. If you understood love, you would have no problem with duty. To reach people, speak human, not Christianese. How are people supposed to know what our lingo means if we don't tell them? How are people supposed to know where to sit if we don't tell them? How in the world do we explain to them? Like, this is a challenge that I think about that keeps me awake every time we have communion the night before. How in the world are we going to explain this thing we do called the ordinance of humiliation? Humility. How in the world are we going to explain foot washing to someone who's never read John 13 and they think we are crazy going into the room and washing each other's feet? We got to do it. I'm not saying we don't do the foot washing or the communion. I'm saying we got to find a way to not do it in Christianese. If only the French channel had put subtitles. It wouldn't have taken me 46 years to find out what David Letterman was saying to Mark. First time I walked into an Adventist church. I knew a little bit about them. Well, it wasn't the first time, maybe the second or third, but very early in. I knew a little bit about them. I didn't like it. I was there because there was a girl there. Just gonna be honest, because that's called speaking their language. Some people call it dating evangelism. I don't recommend it, I'm just saying. I knew a little bit about them. I knew, now you guys are gonna start laughing here in a minute, because everyone who's an Adventist will get it. And everyone who's not an Adventist won't. Don't worry, I will tell you the joke. And this is a true story. There was no potluck. But somebody, God bless them, wanted to be a connector on a Lego block. They needed to look at the instructions in the Lego a little bit more, though. But at least they were trying. Now, they came up to me. And they invited me to lunch at their house. In a way that completely freaked me out. I wanted to run out of that place and never come back just because they tried to invite me to lunch, but they couldn't speak normal people language. Now, those of you who have been around the Adventist church for a while, I knew they were vegetarian. I didn't have a problem with that. I could do vegetarian. But these people were crazy dedicated. I mean, these people, I thought, they must be insane. I'm like, I can understand being healthy. But you know what they invited me to come to lunch to eat? Remember, Christianese. We're Adventist. And they were so proud they had it. You're going to love it. It's everyone's favorite here. I'm like, the whole place are freaks. They invited me to go back to their house and eat haystacks. Stop and think about what haystacks means to everybody else who isn't an Adventist in the world. And you know that they're vegetarian. And you can tell they're wearing suits and they're playing very formal music. You know they're conservative. And they are just so happy that they have a guy with long hair and a leather jacket in their church. And they're like, you've got to try Grandma's haystacks. I'm like, I know I got a little bit of weight, but don't call me a cow. For those of you who don't know, haystacks is an Adventist word for taco salad. I don't want to break it to you, but that's all it is. It's taco salad. I know you think you're all cool and you got your theories about the cheese goes on before the beans and where the corn. There's whole debate clubs about how you layer your haystack. But I got news for you. The rest of the world calls it taco salad. And you're going to say, no, taco salad is what? No. If we don't care enough about people trying to, like we're supposed to go after those who aren't even trying. We have to care enough for those who are at least trying to understand this. You see, I have a theory. My theory is this. People aren't rejecting Jesus. They're rejecting how they heard about him. And what they had to go through to hear about him. N.T. Wright put it this way. N.T. Wright said, Paul's aim was not to affirm all cultures, but to confront all cultures with the gospel. How? In a way that they could hear. Oh, I don't like the new bulletin, someone might say, or I don't like the new music, or I don't like. Well, maybe they didn't like the old music. Maybe they did, I don't know. Maybe we have some of both. I don't know, but the point is, we have to build in connections for everyone's culture, or they're not going to be able to become a part of our Lego church. See, Paul was ready to have his culture posture changed. Paul was educated by Gamaliel, the highest level scholar in the ancient world. He was the Kremlin. He was like Harvard. And he went and hung out with fishermen and got beat up by guards. Paul gave up his rights when he was like, I count it a privilege to go to jail for the cause of Jesus. Some of us can't make it through the sermon for the cause of Jesus. No, we're much better than that, but I'm just making the point. Paul should have taken Gamaliel's place. In Athens, he became a tent maker so he could preach the gospel. He even changed his name from Saul, which was his real name, to Paul, to contextualize who he was so that Greeks could understand him. That's why he said, to the weak, I became weak. I have become all things to all people by all means possible that I might save some. Tim Mackey puts it this way. He says, Paul empties himself of a very dirty word. Are we allowed to say dirty words in church? This is a dirty word. Privilege. Privilege is a dirty word. Privilege is when you say, it doesn't have to be my way, but it's going to be my way. My church, my way. Paul emptied himself of privilege. No. Not because he didn't want to be Jew anymore. Not because he didn't like Jews anymore. No, he told you, if they're Jewish, I'll be more Jewish. If they're not Jewish, I'll be more Gentile. No. For the sake of others, just like Jesus. And so, I'm going to call Pastor Coastley up here for a few minutes to join me in this sermon. We're tag teaming here. We're not going to take too much longer, but this is really important. It's so important, I don't want to leave it to one pastor. It's so important, I got to call in the big guns. It's so important, I got to have the guy who's led most of this series. Because here's the thing, if we don't got the information, if we don't know how to know what our church is doing, if we don't understand how our church works, how are we going to find a way to communicate it to people who are trying to watch Mork and Mindy in French? We might need someone who speaks French.
Bienvenue.
Très bien. See, je parle petit français. And all the people who speak French are like, don't do that again. In Vienna, we have ways that we communicate to you, and we have ways that we communicate outside to the church. And we would like you to be plugged in every way possible. Because when you are plugged in every way possible, that you have all of the information to help other people in the hallway when they don't know if it's potluck, in the hallway when they don't know what Connection Cafe is, in the hallway when they hear someone talking about cars and columns. What is this weird group they have? That's almost like that church I heard about that had haystacks. But when we know what we do, and we know how we know what we do, then we can be faithful apostles. Remember what apostles are? Buddies of Jesus who he sends out to help people in life. Mm-hmm. Paul was an apostle. Paul said he received his gospel from Jesus. So, Pastor, we have a number of ways that we communicate in-house and to the community. In the fastest way, given the credit where the credit goes, the fastest way is all Pastor Coastley's doing. The guy wasn't even hired yet. We were still interviewing. And I was talking to him, and he said, preacher, he always says that, preacher, you know about Slack? Your church is going to love Slack. He said, Slack is like going to church and coming home with church in your pocket all week long. What do you mean by that?
So to tell you a little bit about Slack, Slack is a collaborative platform that's tech talk. Simple, it's a way to communicate very easily on the go. In Slack, you have the ability to add your photo, and you can contact anyone who's in Slack. Right now, we have 89 profiles, persons in Slack, and that's about 50%, almost 70 to 50, no, 70.
Those are evangelism numbers.
Yes, there we go. We'll leave that out to it. But that's a good portion of our church right now. So if you wanted to reach Pastor Vinny, myself, the elders, any of our leaders, you can simply send a message on Slack and reach us. And the way to get on Slack, simply go to the Connection Cafe, and one of our volunteers will be able to get you plugged in. You download the app, we'll get you signed in, and you're connected connected to the church on the go.
Pastor, the thing I like about Slack is, yes, it is for us to communicate. And I would tell you, I don't know what percent of the church is on it, but I would tell you without a doubt, 95% of the leadership is on Slack.
Absolutely.
And 95% of the teams that leaders build migrate to Slack. But what I love about Slack is you could be a first-time visitor today. You make it your way over to Connection Cafe, or you see one of us, and you get on that today. You don't need to give anybody your phone number. You don't need to give anybody your home address. And they're not going to know all yours either. But they can instantly start texting you without sharing data. It's speaking their language, keeping them private, but plugged in. Now, TogetherNet is a little bit of a different thing. It's been around here for a while, but you, again, there's a reason we hire the best. Brought the whole system, the software behind TogetherNet to Potomac Conference and launched it throughout the conference. You're actually in the department overseeing me. So you brought TogetherNet to the whole conference. Tell us why people should join TogetherNet.
So TogetherNet is like Slack. It's our interactive communication platform. Quite simply, if you want to know what's happening at church, you want to be on TogetherNet. We've got a calendar, we've got directories where you can meet with your team members and communicate with them. It is the best way to do church digitally.
Yes, and we would also like them to keep their profile up to date.
Yes.
Can
I share a personal story?
Yes.
Let me tell you.
Yes.
So I've been here at Vienna for almost a year and a half now. But when I first came into the building, you can imagine as a first-time new pastor here, I saw a sea of faces, 200 individuals in the congregation. But thanks to TogetherNet, after meeting all the beautiful faces, I was able to log in and find my elder. So by the next week, I knew who Elder Novi was, Elder Anita was, Elder Mark, Elder Mike. And it allowed me to get connected to the church and hit the ground running. Something that usually takes a pastor 6 to 12 months to do, I was able to achieve in about 2 weeks, thanks to TogetherNet.
Yes. Now, the church newsletter?
Church newsletter is now we're introducing a passive way of communicating. This is the best way to find out everything that's happening at church. Every Friday in the afternoon, an email goes out and it has all the church announcements, anything that's happening in church. It comes right into your inbox. You read it at your leisure. You can share it with a friend as well too. It's our passive way of keeping you connected to us.
Yeah, the church call. Now, we need to get some people to join the church call.
Yes, we do.
And I think that I've heard people speaking Christianese about the church call and it not being translated for other people. So I'm going to attempt to make it plain. Some people think the church call is a call list you get on just in case it snows, you know not to come to church. No, it will do that. If it snows or if church is canceled for summer, it will tell you. But the reason you get on a church call is it's an audible newsletter from one of the pastors, usually this guy. But I do it too. And it tells you who's preaching. Tells you what the sermon's about. Might even tell you what Bible verse to look at before you get here. Tells you if there's potluck. Tells you if there's some big meeting going on. It sets you up on Friday night to be ready. And don't listen to this part. I just let it go to voicemail and then my phone translates it for me. Or I can listen to it when I want. So if you're not on church call, we would ask you to please get on church call. And you can do that, again, at Connection Cafe or this QR code that's on the screen. Pastor, what are all these TVs doing all? You know all these TVs over here?
I'm so glad you asked. In addition to the bulletin, in addition to all these ways of communicating with you, we also put all of our announcements on our TVs. So as you're walking in the hallway, we encourage you to slow down, stop. This is where you'll find the pulse of the church. Anything that's happening from sermon series, if there's potluck this week, events that are upcoming, we keep it on the screens, rotating all throughout the week and on Sabbath as well, too.
Right. So think about, anyone go to the Kennedy Center ever? Oh, well, when we went to Kennedy Center and we were seeing a play, and we could see all the upcoming plays on TV screens, all through the Kennedy Center. You can find out what sermons next week on the screens. You can find out when potluck is on the screens. You can find out that there's a special lunch in honor of anyone who's served in the church on this TV screen. Because sometimes you're just sitting there in line for potluck, and the screens are still educating you. We are trying to many methods for one message, right? Many ways. What about this thing here?
So glad you asked. This bulletin is the very best bulletin. You can go anywhere in the world. You're not going to find a bulletin like ours. As a matter of fact, we had someone who travels globally sit next to me in church and says, Pastor, explain this bulletin to me. So let me take this moment to explain it to you. The top part is a connection card. Here, we're not going to ask you to go door to door, do things that maybe you're not comfortable with. But here, you've got a digital evangelistic tool. You like a sermon one Sabbath, you simply take this top part, take it with you, share it with a friend. On the back side, it's got the QR code. On the front side, it's got the sermon, and you can let people know about the church. The middle part, I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to throw the bottom part to you.
Okay.
The middle part is to give you, on the front side, the order of service, so you can see what's happening. But additionally, you'll see the order of service on the big screens as well. So you're not going to miss a single thing. On the back, we include the announcements and also a space where you can take notes. If there's one phrase that catches your attention, this is the part that you get to keep with the announcements on one side and then a place for notes right beneath. And now for the bottom part, Pastor, when you tell us about it.
We were talking about how we're losing track of what Sabbath we didn't have a baptism because we've been having so many baptisms. So far this summer, we've had more baptisms than weeks. And it's because of the bottom part of this card. And it only works, well, it works, but it only works perfectly if everybody who can contributes to it. Because this card asks everybody to make decisions about the sermon you heard today, and I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to ask you in a little bit to sign up for Slack. Will you make that decision today? I'm going to ask you, will you sign up for the church call? I'm going to ask you, we're going to ask you to make decisions. But on the other side, we're asking people, do you need information about our amazing school? Do you want to get on our amazing newsletter? Would you like to get baptized? And every week, even when we have a slow week, someone is making decisions on this card. But here's the caveat. A new person is going to say, this card may not be important because nobody else is filling it out around me. But a new person may also say, I see everybody filling out this card, so it must be important to me. And what I know is there is a direct increase of baptisms that correlates with how many cards overall come in. Low number of cards coming in, low baptisms. High number of cards coming in, more baptisms. So when we say we've been having lots of baptisms, guess what? Thank you for your ministry of handing in the card. Quickly, Paul says, I do all this, not because the pastors had this long sermon. I do all this, not because both pastors came to make sure they browbeat us. I do all this, well, maybe because Robin Williams was really cool, but they don't do all it for Robin Williams even. Do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in it. Paul says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way to get the prize. I strike blows in the air to my body, to make it a slave, that I may have preached to others, that I myself may not be disqualified from the prize. In other words, Paul says, when you learn to speak the native language of people and forsake your privilege to Christianese, and it is your privilege, you will win the race. You will win the race. And so, as the praise team comes, this is what your little card that you're all ripping off right now and filling out frantically, right? I can see you.
May I interject? Also, if you don't have a card, simply raise your hand.
Yes.
We'll get the cards out
We'll
to
bring
you
a
right
card
now.
to you right now.
Okay, let me go ahead and grab cards.
Yep, they're coming. Yeah, as he's doing that, I was going to read these and step down so I get out of their way. Here's what we're asking you today. We're asking you, if you're not on Slack, to join Slack. If you're not on the Vienna church call, to join the Vienna church call. If you don't have an updated picture, it would be really helpful to us if you would update your picture in Togetherness. And lastly, my personal challenge. Starting August, I want to see how many of you do this last one. Starting August, for 1 month, you'll read the newsletter every week. Oh, one more thing about the newsletter. The software we use, we know when you read it or don't. So my challenge is, could you read the newsletter every week in August? Why? So you will be ready to share with the visitor, to be a spot on the Lego board, to build the church of tomorrow.